welcome. Very good to see you. And this is the third in today's series of Gallery Weekend Art Talks, and it's the first one that deals with an exhibition that is part of Gallery Weekend, which is at Ebersberger Gallery, and it opens tonight at 7, 8? 8-ish, though it's always good if you're there a little bit early. And this is a show by the artist sitting to my left, by Göksu Kunak. So please, before I do the introductions, one first round of applause. Now, I will give a little bit of an introduction, and then there will be more introductions for the two speakers on the panel here today. So, we are very lucky that Léon Kruijswijk has agreed to interview Göksu Kunak today. Léon is, a fixture, or used to be a fixture of the Berlin art scene and the Berlin performative scene. He's currently, however, a performance curator at Mudam in Luxemburg, and I'll do something that I normally don't like to do, which is to read a written bio, because this great thing is that this is a biography that focuses on artists and artists that Léon has worked with. So, Léon has been a performance curator at Mudam Luxemburg, Musée d'Art Moderne Grand-Duc Jean. At Mudam, he has curated a major Simon Fujiwara retrospective and a performance program titled The Journey. The program features installations and live works by Ivan Cheng, So Jung-Yun, Mohamed Tukabiri, and Seraphine 1369. And prior to that time at Mudam, he was also a curator here in Auguststrasse at KW Institute for Contemporary Art. And there, and this is the part that I have seen in person and really appreciated, he curated large-scale performances by a number of artists, including Alexis Blake, Michaela Rizzo, and Billy Boutil and James Richards, and in general turned KW into the space that it usually has been, but became once again as sort of a lively space for experimenting and different kinds of art. And he's also co-curated with Joël Valabrega, who's going to be here tomorrow for another Gallery Weekend Art Talk. He curated the Present-Future section of Artissima Art Fair in Turin, and we're really, really happy that you're here. And you'll talk in a second about how you know Göksu. And Göksu is also I think, one of the most important artists working in Berlin right now, and also now one of the most decorated. You won the Akademie der Künstlerpreis in 2025, so belated congratulations to that. And has since worked in a number of sort of score-based performances that work with a body in a number of ways, as a simulacrum and as a sculptural object. Their work has been shown in a number of institutions, including KW, and also including Neue Nationalgalerie, where for one of the first Perform festivals in 2023, there was a performance that prominently featured a car and several collaborators. And since then, also numerous other performances, including recently Innocence, the re-uptake of Innocence at Sophienseele, which I was lucky enough to see. And I don't think I can recommend it anymore because it's not on anymore, but I would have recommended it. So you'll have to be there tonight. So please join me once again in welcoming Göksu and Léon. Thank you for being here.
Test. Yes, it's on. Thank you for the introduction, Gregor, and thank you also for the invitation, Emily and Gallery Weekend and Gregor. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, it's not the first time that we work together, Göksu, as Gregor already touched upon briefly. But I would like to take you back just as some background information, like how it started. It's because I was still at KW at the time, and I saw a reading event that was happening at Hopscotch Berlin, which is a small alternative bookshop here in Schöneberg, not far from here actually, where Gucci Chunk, Göksu's alias at the time, was holding a fundraising reading event. It was a mixture of guests that you had there, and you also read an old text that you wrote yourself about avatars and simulation. And that led to an invitation. I invited you to do a pogo bar at KW's basement, which is an experimental performance program that I used to run during my time there. And there you did a performance titled Cabaret Portrait Döner Blackout 2, which was then later in 2019. telling the past and present and future of all places. It was like a mixed TV show with Eastern Dada kitsch about a confused nation and a kidnapped prime minister, but seen through a personal lens. It was a fusion of many topics. And here again, I would like to share that you were working on under an alias at the time, Gucci Junk, and throughout the talk it will become clear what that means and where it comes from. And afterwards, that actually was a moment, end of a friendship, end of a professional relationship that we continue to do, where we work together on 3 exhibitions that are interconnected. One called Dikje at number 1 Main Road in 2023, where you had a large body of work dealing with notions of camouflage. And then we moved on to Bygone Innocence, where we started at Pilevneli Gallery in Istanbul in 2024, and that later also was shown at Kunsthalle Krems in Austria as part of Donau Festival. And for that body of work, you departed from a car accident that happened in Turkey in Susurluk in 1996, which at the time caused a big shock in politics and society in Turkey. Yeah, and we will touch upon these and so, but yeah, we've had many exchanges, but I mean, I think we did some tours together, but we never had like a talk like this, so that's nice to do. Before we dive deeper, I'm actually curious to see who of you has seen a performance by Göksu or an installation. Raise your hand. It's okay if you didn't, because you can and live it vicariously through the pictures that we will show you and the words that we will share with you. Okay, but it's nice to see that some of you have seen it live. Yeah, so we have a little journey behind us, but you, of course, as a human being, as an artist, have a longer journey behind you. And we're going to dive into some of these fragments today. And when we were preparing this talk, you suggested to go back to a root, a visual that has influenced you strongly, which we see here behind us. Can you please elaborate on the monument that we're seeing here, how it has shaped you at the time, and also yeah, what perspectives it brought to you before you were an artist?
Thank you so much for being here, and also thank you so much for the invitation, all the work that Emily and Gregor put into it, as well as also all the people behind. The reason I wanted to start with this image is like I work a lot with bodybuilders and also sports endurance, and actually it goes back to this monument from one of the first monuments in Ankara, Central Anatolia, where I grew up. This was designed by Clemens Holzmeister, an Austrian architect who also designed the Großes Festspielhaus in Salzburg. And during the war, he escaped to Turkey and he did a lot of works there. And it was the beginning of, you know, there's a very big bus stop in front of this monument. So as a teenager, I used to go there a lot to take the bus and go to other parts in the city. And as you can see, especially here, I don't know how it's possible to see it, but like it's super hyper real and simulacral because there are certain muscles that don't exist in the human body, and it was there. A part of it is also this nation-state narration in Turkey, you know, the worker, the hard worker, the strong body. And it was all around this late modernist narrative and visual regime that the new republic wanted to build. So it's actually going back to such a monument from 1937, one of the first monuments in Turkey, more than the recent interest in the you know, body and bodybuilding, which is also an interesting new episode for the change of how we understand and see bodies and going through a certain extent what the body can do. You know, now we are trying to build such bodies in real, not only in sculptures. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll come to that later. Wait, can you go to the next one?
Yeah.
Yeah, this idea of the construction of the body, the construction of identity, the construction of a nation state is something that you have been addressing also as an academic, as you were before. And so, can you maybe take us back to the moment of your more academic research and your approach to visual culture at the time, and also how visual culture then influenced your vision of art history?
I studied interior architecture, and in the meantime, I had a very strong dance practice, ballet and modern dance, in total 10 years. And but at one point, I felt that my body is not capable of what ballet and modern dance wants from me. And then I was also more interested in form and presence and sculpture than the virtuosity of the body has to do on the stage. And then I decided to study art history. And my professor back then, Zeynep Yasayaman, she was really already talking about decolonial art history, canons that are outside of the Western canon, and feminist theories. So she also kind of, knowing my history with dance and body, she kind of influenced me to research more about representation of the female body in relation to performance art, Western and non-Western. So I did my master's thesis on the representation of the female body and the notion of the female in Turkey from 1970 to 1980, the years where Western feminism was very strong in the country. And I looked through how the paintings of that era saw the women, and at the same time how popular culture was representing the women. So I looked through this tabloid magazine called Ses, and I also looked at different artists, both female and male, how they were seeing this character. And there are definitely, interestingly, seriously constructed narratives about gender in certain nation states. Also right now is going on, of course, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's also interesting to go back to this moment, ballet dancer, academic, visual culture, popular culture, art history. It's all these different elements that still make the practice that you're doing today, but in a very different way. Instead of studying it or being a professor at a university, it influences your artistic work, but it will become clearer when we talk. So, you've also written a lot, even afterwards. That's also like a foundation of your practice, of the first stages. Maybe you want to share a little bit about your writing practice also, and yeah, maybe also like how does build a foundation for your artistic practice, but also how you include text formats in your current work, and if you see any parallels between writing a text and the work you do at the moment. I see them, but...
Actually, I'm super thankful to Léon, because you were one of the few people who trusted me and invited me to do a lecture performance. It was one of my first lecture performances, actually, because I used to be an academic and then art and dance critic. And in 2016, I had a little bit of a nervous breakdown, depression, about what am I doing? Is this the thing that I want to do? And I was also back then working with Ibraz. Stephanie Bailey was my editor. And I didn't want to conclude a text. And she was like, why don't you just write a conclusion? I was like, I don't want to write a conclusion. I'm fed up with this type of writing. I just want to write fragmented stuff, you know, maybe short stories and things like that. So, but writing has been and still is a big, very crucial part of my practice. And I started with, as I said, lecture performances, and at the same time, flash fictions, short stories, and I think to a certain extent, I'm in my performances, or in other pieces, installations, or sculptures, I'm still working a lot with writing exercises, you know, cutout technique, plagiarism, Kathy Acker and Willem Barrows, or Sevim Burak, who's a Turkish writer from the 80s. She was writing super hybrid texts. So I think I'm still influenced by these writing practices.
Yeah, by writing intertextual, maybe not copy-pasting, but quoting and referencing, compiling different fragments, combining them together in different chapters.
Also, Kenneth Goldsmith had this book called Uncreative Writing, and back then it was such an influence for me because what he says in a theory is that everything possible is written. Don't try to write something yourself because it won't make any sense, because everything perfect could be written, is written, like proofs and everything. So he was suggesting that you just use the things that are already on internet, online or offline in the books. So I'm also still using this, like taking existing texts and rewriting them in my own way, you know.
Yeah, but by rewriting them, you also, and by recompiling them and making assemblages, you also make something new out of it. So, of course. Yeah, you want to?
Yeah, that's Anakara. I'll be very honest, I didn't start early. Like art making, I started making art in the way I do in 2019, actually, when we also started to work together with Léon. And Anakara was a project that I was already working on, but I could show it in 2021 at Sofiinzele. This is a later iteration that I did in a museum, but it's normally a frontal theater piece. It's based on a text. I used to work like that. I used to write a text. I used to do a long research and write a text afterwards, and the text used to be always in the background, spoken in this way. And then it was kind of turning into certain elements in the performance, whether it's a video or a costume or a certain movement. And Anakara was the first one. And later, like now I work differently, but it was like that in the past.
Yeah, maybe this is also like one of the performances or works where indeed like text was still very present, even maybe not like readable, but like read out loud. So, and indeed, as you said, there was always like this voice in the background, almost like embracing the work, and so like pulling the work together. Do you want to talk about the next slide or not?
True. Yeah, we can also briefly mention it. That's also
Yeah, maybe to show the breadth of Göksu's art making and practice. Yeah, maybe you want to dive into this.
It's just a very brief, one of the things that I also still work on some publications from time to time. I actually want to make another one because my specialty when I was a journalist was interviews. So I actually want to make interviews with several artists about survival, like in the sense that this was the first iteration that we did with Andrea Belline. We asked artists how to survive, how would you give an advice to the newcomer artists. This also started at in Geneva. My French is terrible. Centre d'Art Contemporain Genève. I was a part of we were living and making a performance festival in the space, and I was asking everyone, how do you survive? Because I know they were amazing performers, but everyone was a little bit short on budget, including me. So, and I was talking with a friend who actually got a prize, but he had only 30 euros in his bank account. So we were talking about these issues, and afterwards we just extended to the very interesting artists who quote unquote made it. So we just asked for advice to a certain extent, yeah.
In general, like departing from this academic but also early ballet practice, but then into writing, journalism, experimental writing, you started to work with many other mediums, very cross-medium. You work with performance, with text, installation, sound, film, found footage, but also newly shot video. Also recently drawing and painting and sculpture. What we see here are some photos of a recent exhibition you did at Gestengesellschaft in Hanover. And in this body of work that you presented there, but also in other ones, there's also like a reference to a either like a cultural product, like a movie or an occurrence from recent history that have shaped contemporary culture and politics. For the exhibition at Gesellschaft, it was the film Don't Let Them Shoot the Kite from 1989. And I already mentioned before, like the Susaluk accident from 1996. Can you maybe share like where these cultural references come from, how you unpack them, and how you further develop them?
For Gesellschaft, it's actually, I think, the first piece that I don't use my body because it's not about my own story. It's Alexander Wimten, the back then interim director and now also still the curator of Gesellschaft, told me like, hey Göksu, like actually Gesellschaft is in the Turkish Arab community and no one actually is talking about it, this building, and then there's a some kind of a distance between us, like unfortunately with the people, our neighbors. So we decided to, I was also given in this in-between space, the cafe, which is just next to the facade. And I wanted to do something about the history of this journey in between, not because it's an architecturally an in-between space. I wanted to also talk about the journey between Turkey and Germany here instead of the time here right now, what's happening. So one of the starting points was this film, Don't Let Them Shoot the Kite, which is a very, very sad film about a 3-year-old kid who had to be in prison because in Turkey there's this rule, there's this law, if a mother gets into the prison, the kid has to go in with the mother. So, and it's about escaping, moving, flying, and there's a scene where there's a kite appearing above the prison, and the guards are trying to shoot the kite, and they cannot at the end. And you know, there is a moment of like a very innocent structure, kite flying, and the prison, the guards seeing it as a threat, which also actually reminds me of the like history of the guest workers who are coming here, and yeah. And then I was looking through the archives, the Domid archives, when they were, because in between Turkey and Germany, German government put a job center in Istanbul, and whoever had to come here had to go through these very quite violent medical examinations. And these are actually the gestures of the workers. And John Berger has a book about it, by the way. These events were, of course, photographed, and so they had to go through these examinations. And during the examinations, these are the gestures of 2 guest workers. One of them was like he didn't want to see it because his genitals were being examined, and the other one was like in this hope moment, this arrival of like, okay, what's going on? What was the question? I just continued. By the way, I ask Léon to stop me sometimes because sometimes I just go, you know.
And that's why I suggest that we now move. We talk about this later because we have another one. But this is also maybe a nice bridge. Oh, sorry if you were taking photos. I don't think I can go back, but.
Go back from here.
Can I? Okay. Well, let's still stick to this. I mean, what you were saying about this job center where people were checked and evaluated and examined and so before they could move on to like a different country, a different temporality. I mean, that kind of ties into a very important topic in your body of research, which is chronopolitics. It's something you may have seen already the term like in one of the essays that we were showing before. And I think indeed the idea of chronopolitics and hyperassemblage are key. I mean, I already touched upon the hyperassemblage as like the cross-medium way of working. But maybe you want to say like what chronopolitics does for you, and maybe like a very brief introduction to it.
In a very, very basic way, coming from anti-imperialist and decolonial perspective, like for instance, how Enlightenment practice saw certain cultures and certain countries or regions as primitive, backwards, and how they portrayed themselves as the forward nation-building modernist entities. So it starts from that, you know, like who decides who has the right time, who is the contemporary, and who has the ownership of time. But at the same time, if you look at it for now, from our perspective, let's say a very basic example, the German government is supporting married couples and people who give birth, and if you're a queer existence, or let's say if you're a trans folk, your existence, your birth even is not considered within a certain time frame. These are the very basic examples. Or like kind of taking a certain we can also talk about, let's say, non-Western dramaturgy, Beirut School, the absence, the disappearing past, like let's say a certain hegemonic structure claiming that a certain past never happened, but these folks, Armenian genocide or genocide that is happening right now, like these things that is happening, but let's say a government or a certain structure saying it never happened.
Yeah, or like a more like clear context, also like the extended time that as an asylum seeker needs to go through the whole bureaucratic
limbo.
Exactly,
Yeah.
the limbo, keeping waiting, making it difficult to file a lawsuit. Or
Mudam works a lot with it, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Or where you have people who have money, who kind of can own time in a certain way, can file or like bypass a lawsuit very quickly because they have a certain ownership to time. Yeah. I mean, this is like I mean, I think this chronopolitics is really like an undercurrent in the work that is in very many projects coming. Also in the exhibition that's opening tonight. It's all about time and controlling time. So diving further into the work and knowing more about the conceptual and cultural references. Do you want to share more about your artistic methodology? Because you're working with these two strands, so to say. Like, how do you start a new project?
So I work with two methodologies. One of them is it depends on the concept, research, funding, structure, and where it is. For instance. Sometimes I have these very long rehearsals, it always starts with a long research, but the end point goes into long rehearsals, long discussions with a dramaturg or an outside eye, like Acayip Mahlukat, or like Venus, how we did it here, it's a score-based art happening, that there's a score on purpose, we rehearse a little, and then we just, go into it, and there's this excitement also that comes from this okay, what's going on right now? And it's like a methodology that I also work with, that I use according to the space. And for Acayip Mahlukat, one thing that I also work with is sometimes the research turns into a stage piece, a very slow text-based stage piece.
Merging with homelessness. We see it as life.
Akşam olur mektupları hasretlik söyle. Siperden sipere ateş tokuşturanları, karanlıkta dem tutan İshak kuşu.
Every night it turns in. First I say that, like, let's say it's a theater piece, a certain slow movement turning into using a different structure in the space, or it's the same piece turned into an exhibition that Léon curated called Gespräch, and I also made video works according to it. So like the same research turns into different form and formats. And Presente is actually here. She also, in Acayip Mahlukat, I invited 3 different artists. One of them is Frisante, who is a pole artist and also works with kinetic sculpture. Another friend who does climbing. I invited him to do a remake of Blind Perineum with Matthew Barney, I hope in the picture with Matthew Barney. And another night was with a bodybuilding burlesque performance by a female performer. So this very structured theater piece turned into art happening, and afterwards it turned into opening in the piece itself, with videos and different materials. So I try to work, the chronopolitics also come in here because I try to work with I move because of time. Chronopolitics also works with, the certain codes of the black box versus certain codes of the white cube versus, let's say, a strip club or an entertainment space or a car park or a street. So how do you and your body acts according to a certain structure? So what I try to do in the performance, as much as I can, try to simulate a situation in between another situation. Let's say we come to the theater, we sit, but there's a runway. The performance happens in a runway, and then from the performance, then Frisenta comes, and then completely we shapeshift the environment to a much more punk moment, and then it turns into an opening. So you as the audience have to adjust to these different codes of how you should be behaving in the space, and that's the yeah.
Yeah, maybe before because there's a couple of, I see time also running out, talking about time. So there's 3 more themes that I would like to talk about, because there's here we see indeed the exhibition Décure. Maybe we can go to the next slide. And this exhibition, it's all about notions of camouflage and hypervisibility, or camouflage through hypervisibility. And I think this is also a core idea that you mainly explore in this body of work, but also that's something that you keep on referring back to. Maybe you can explain what camouflage through hypervisibility is for you.
I will make a very short explanation of it. Camouflage comes from not as a figure and ground relationship, but comes more from the idea of taqiyya from Islam. I grew up as Muslim, and I was practicing it heavily until the age of 20, 21. So it comes from this idea in taqiyya that Allah says that if you're in danger as a Muslim, you can pretend to be something else. Now, for instance, from the jihadist perspective, they use it as a defense technique, offense technique. It is actually defense, it's a protective technique. And I was thinking, also reading Cyclonopedia by Negarastani. Right now, he's very involved in dark enlightenment, I've heard, but back then he was a very interesting theorist. So it's more about the idea of decaying and blending in a certain identity. And, let's say in the West, there's this thing of if you're queer, you have to come out. What I was saying that no, you can be different identities and kind of decay in certain places, and what Negarastani also talks about, oil, war zones, dust. Identity is not something that is you have to strongly hold on to. So we were playing with this idea of one character becoming so many things at the same time.
About shapes shifting, indeed, and then maybe from this idea of camouflage. Or concealing and revealing, innocence and bygone innocence. They talk about the Susoluk accident, which is a point of departure. Maybe you can share a little bit more about how that body of work started and what it means within your work.
In 1996, a car crash happened in Turkey, which is still normal. Car crashes happen a lot. I heard that the possibility of dying from a car crash in Turkey is way more than a normal death. But in this car crash, there was a guy, they all died. One of them was the driver who was searched by Interpol. The other one was the former head of the Istanbul police department. At the back, there was a Kurdish MP from the right-wing Turkish government, and there was a beauty queen who was the girlfriend of the criminal who was being searched by Interpol. So, of course, it was like a thing of like, how come these people are all together in the same car? And I thought, back then I was reading J.G. Ballard Crash, and also Atrocity Exhibition, and I all of a sudden remembered this very intense scandal from my childhood in the 90s, and I just like made a link between what's going on right now, and then they also realized that actually there's a very strong mafia, drugs, deep state, government connection. So again, this piece turned into a performance at Sophienseele that we also showed at Kampdangel Hamburg, and another exhibition that Léon curated. And I work a lot with Paul, not as a, that's another kinetic. I work a lot with remakes from certain artistries, and I work with Paul as a body hung in the space, and I work with hung sculptures. You know, when I see Paul, I think about, for instance, also Calde, or let's say a body that is turning in repetition, and sometimes in certain parts we also reference to B-movies, use a very like a cheesy, normal, well-known pole structure, but sometimes we also work a lot with pole dancer Göksu in the repetition and how a body is in the space. And yeah, so I also work with a lot with hung sculptures, as I said.
Maybe, yeah, I need like further about the Susurluk accident when we were doing it also in Istanbul, where we had like an artist talk, also like a tour and so. And at the time, it was interesting to see like the different contexts. Also, I think like where there were many people who actually were adults at the time when the accident happened. There was really like this shift in a certain public perception, right? Of that this idea of that the deep state indeed exists was proven, and so on. That's something that also became like very clear during that moment. Yeah, talking about like pole dancing and like hanging from the ceiling, and so is opening up the verticality of a space. And maybe there's also like this idea of like flipping of like the inside, outside, the visible and the invisible. So you maybe want to share a little bit like what, yeah, your approach to it. This idea of like opening up within a certain given space another dimension.
It also goes again this idea of simulacra. When I was reading Baudrillard's Simulacrum, there is actually a chapter about J.G. Ballard's Crash, and he's talking about like why the book Crash is a simulacra, because it's talking about a world that is actually very similar to ours, but there's something very off that is very indifferent to what we are living in. And within the car crash that happened in Susurluk, the reverse happened, that the Turkey, like the country, was in a simulacra of this happy state, and the crash that leaked through this, and then the rawness and the reality came back to the surface. So it was also, and so it was like a very also into, if you think about space, it was like kind of shapeshift. So I'm also, that's why I'm thinking about these, you know, reversal, upside down, or in between. And also in the form, not only in the concept. Yeah,
yeah, or like a T-shirt that you put inside out, so you see the seams and how it's made, instead of how the deep state actually makes up the facade of society. Yeah. No, we actually know we have something more to talk about, because there's something happening tonight, namely at Ebensberger. Yeah. Wait, let me see where we have the. I don't know, wait, maybe back.
No, we don't have that.
Yeah, but we can go back.
Have that. We go back to Venus.
Yeah, we go back to a car because.
Yes. Yeah.
At 8.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I also wanted to talk about is that in relation to also, for instance, I'm always working with certain dramaturgies, and when Klaus Biesenbach invited me, I knew that this is a Berlin Art Week opening in this space. So how I normally work with text wouldn't work here. So I decided to make a little bit of a spectacle. But what we are actually talking about is the freedom of movement and impossibility of movement sometimes. So there's a platform, a very fast car on the platform, but can only go back and forth. And there's a big bodybuilder in 190 tied to a car, and again cannot move. So it's also about this thing of like whatever, even though you have so much power in yourself, like the unseen forces can restrict you. And of course we made a Turkish soap opera around it. I used a lot of kitsch, turned into a spectacle and about power dynamics. So I think today at Ebensperger with Remains, we are doing a little bit of a different but similar idea. It's a score-based performance today and tomorrow, giving references to, because in Remains, it's all about the immateriality, ephemerality of performance, this funny question of like how to sell performance art, you know, this thing. And so today we're starting with the remakes of Yves Klein's anthropometries. And instead of using beautiful female nudes, I will use, quote unquote, the very like interesting performance bodybuilder, male bodybuilder, and CrossFit practitioners, wrestlers. There's a female karate champion who will be doing these paintings with the blue color and their bodies. And during the course of the exhibition, we will have several very different performances, all based on drawings and the residues of a performance, as well as disappearing paths. And
maybe you quickly want to say something about why, like, the symbol of a car within your practice, because it's a recurring topic, of course, and a recurring performer also. But like you unpack it in various ways beyond like the status symbol.
Today we will also have a car, and today is the first time that we will be using it very differently. But until now, it was always there as a kind of a, because you know in Turkey there's a strong car culture. Of course, you know the German car lobbyism, as well as like different oil wars going on. But for me, it's and there is a film called from the 70s, Mercedes Mon Amour, which is about the road trip of a guest worker from Munich to his hometown in Turkey, home village in Turkey, which is a tragicomic story. So there are different layers of it, and I used to also, like in Ankara, we are all around the cars. So I see cars as a urban monument in which you live, cry, have a, you know, it's a space in itself, it's a home in a certain way, within its good points and also like very problematic views. And it's like a very important symbol in terms of immigration, and also like there are still now on Facebook these accounts that just take photos of immigrants going back and forth from Turkey to Germany, like visiting families. So yeah.
Yeah. So then again, relating to this corner politics, how to control your own time, which is defined by other institution and space and so on. Maybe very, very final before we open the floor for questions is you have another thing coming up, a big one. Yeah. Maybe you want to quickly share. Soon there will be more official announcements, but yes, something for the audience to look forward to.
So it will be announced in 2 weeks, actually. I mean, as you know, Çağla İlk is the new director of Maxim Gorky, and she invited me to make a new piece. So I'm making a dance/theater/art happening piece, The Rite of Spring, going back to the inherent, unnecessary, unfortunate violence in human beings, sacrifice, as well as the dancing plague. And we are also going back to, of course, the Muslim dick rituals. I'm also, like, Corey Scott Gilbert, who performed here last year, he's helping me for the first part of the choreography. He's the co-choreographer, and there's an amazing team. There's a stunt coordinator, Sasha Gernt, Alexa Sizikeres, who was working as an architect at Sub Global. Right now, she's doing stage for our piece. So it's a very beautiful team with different dancers, actors, and also pole and hair hanging practitioners. So it will be premiered next year. So we already started the rehearsal. So in between, simultaneously, I'm also working on this piece.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen anything live by Göksu yet, there's multiple opportunities for you this weekend and soon. Let's leave it at this slide. Yeah. Any questions you may have? Feel free to ask anything.
Thank you for a great talk. I mean, I love your work and I know it. And I was not aware of this reference with which you started, actually, of these sculptures, of this muscular man, in this case, which we know from like many other countries, this kind of sculptures of builders of the nation, let's say. And I feel like this has such a kind of connection with the nation as well as the sport itself, kind of representing different nationalities. And I know that often in your works there are bodybuilders, dancers, and they're often very much in this queer context, and I always thought like the reason why you are using bodybuilders and dancers is more seeing the body as this sculpture, as this object. But now, coming back to this reference, I'm curious if even this idea of a nation or like nationalism is one of the reasons why you are using them.
Yeah, exactly. It's also because it's such a visual narrative that still it is being used a lot. We also just had another slide about Luxemburg, for instance, right? Like, I think on the one hand, of course, we can see them as like, unfortunately, they are very sad men, but at the same time, it's a narration around like a fear and what happened there, right? Like why right now people are really having this need to hit themselves with a fucking hammer, you know? It's just like very funny also, tragicomic. So it's also like, it's super related to how we perform our bodies in space, visual narratives.
Again.
Nation state narratives, and also of course like these monuments, the one on the left side is from 1940s. It's a magazine that was founded by Atatürk, actually the founder of Turkey, to talk about how the new man of the country should be, you know. So it's a narrative about, and then now here it's very interesting. There's a naked bodybuilder woman and a man about talking about the man and woman in 1940 in Turkey. So I find it very interesting. So like there are very, if you dig deep into it, I'm also like still researching, I'm not there yet, but, or like this other one from, you know, Soviet futurisms and how these aesthetics were used is, yeah.
I mean, you can go back to antiquity, no? The
Also,
ideal
yeah.
body, but it's neat. Recurring in many cultures, nations, shape. I mean, similar shapes, but it's some more hyper-real than others and so on, and different variations of it. Anyone else? Don't be shy. It's okay.
So I just have a short question. I would like to understand a little bit more why you use your body in a very sexual way in your performances. What kind of like codes, or where they come from? What's your interest in that?
The thing is, like, I don't use my body only sexually. I am interested in fetish, not because of sexuality, but because I grew up with my mom and dad are doctors. And they were, like, in Turkey, doctors have to work a lot in order to earn a certain money. So I literally grew up in hospitals, and my dad is an orthopedic. So it actually comes from orthopedic prosthesis, and it goes into fetish. And the sexuality is something also, like, you know, we also work with a lot of non-sexual, really blunt things, but I think people also tend to see more sexual things because of the world we are living in. So it also gets, you know, for instance, in the beginning of Innocence, I have a 20 minutes lecture performance that no one ever, you know, took a video of, but people just take a video of the other more. It's also about, I think, the attention economy that we are in right now. But at the same time, I'm pro-sex, you know. It's also a queer community thing.
And there's a layer of also the body inside out, right? I mean, it may be seen as sexual, but it's also not necessarily always meant sexual. It's more like being naked, being out there,
All
raw,
body,
indeed.
object.
Yeah, turning identity upside down, so to say. So, yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you. I mean, it was very interesting to also hear about all of them, you know, where you come from and all of this influences your work. And now especially hearing about your parents being doctors, I wanted to talk about the medical gaze. And I mean, one of the works, again, the Kassler one also has this medical gaze inflicted upon, let's say, to the migrants and the Turkish guest workers, and your parents also having medical gaze. Do you want to research further on this topic, or how also that maybe has a certain influence on your work?
Yeah, it is definitely. It was something that I was researching, and now still it's always a thing. It's always a part of my, you know, male gaze, medical gaze, female gaze, subversion of these different gazes. And I think this medicality is something that is always inherent in terms of prosthesis as well. And thank you for pointing out, also in Kessner Gesellschaft, the sculpture was also about this history, about the medical examination. I think I also want to, like, I think even this thing of tying someone is related with this examination, or how the audience examines like a position. But I also, yeah, true. Maybe it could be also interesting just like to make it much more blunt and really work on these medical understanding. I, for instance, remember one intense, when I was 23 or something like that, I had one of my colleagues in the university, I was working at the university, is gay. And my mom was, you know, I had a argument with my mom. I was referring Judith Butler about gender, and she was referring psychology and medical understanding of queerness. So it's like still a kind of a, you know, contradiction that we're all going through. Yeah.
Thank you for the great talk. I really enjoy it, and I know you work also for a long time. And I want to come back to the question of sexuality and your body, because I studied a lot about feminist body politics, and because you grew up also Muslim and you practiced this religion for a long time, I think it's quite powerful move also. Like you deal with all these very intense political topics, and then you kind of use your body also as a like naked, full-on naked body as a statement, I would say. And I have a question: how does like your did you get also, I mean, you get a lot of positive reactions, of course, but how, for example, like the Turkish, more Muslim community reacted to this? I think it's very brave of you, yeah, but I can imagine it's maybe also not, some people don't react good to it.
What's that? Oh, yeah, yeah, do you remember? Because I sometimes use it as a statement, but sometimes it's also not a statement. It's just like a presence in the sense that, for instance, in Acayip Mahlukat, I start as an animal. An animal is naked, or and then I turn into different beings. And or in the Anakara, it was about monuments, and a monument is usually naked, and in the monument state, I was also trying to put these clay objects, and it was always trying to build a monument, and it's falling down. Sometimes it's really just about the presence of a body, which is an object, which is a raw material, and which is also sometimes animal or different characters, and sometimes it's about sexuality. For instance, when I was topless here, it was really about the balance, because all of us were clothed, and only the bodybuilder who is allowed to be topless in this public space. So I said, no, fuck you, I will also be topless. Let's like build it together. So it's sometimes about it. And sometimes in Turkey, you know, Turkey is like also comes from a very secular, you know, within the late modernization, there's still this secular presence. So some people are okay with it and they understand why. Some people are not. My mom is definitely not okay okay with it. What Léon reminded me is also, I was using Gucci because Microsoft Word was changing my name all the time to Gucci, because there's no, like in this Western built tech, like there was no like name like that, a Middle Eastern name like that. And it was also about this kind of camouflage and my family. I didn't want my family to see me. And it took me a while to gain that courage to say, no, you know what, this is what I'm doing. And then since I changed my name, also, like, you know, there was also kind of this camouflage that I was trying to do with my alias name, which I don't use anymore. So yeah, so sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not, you know. It's also, I'm trying my best to communicate, but it's like there's a certain point. And I think it's also, I don't know, some things are not only sexual also. I'm also curious why everyone is seeing everything as sexual. So yeah, exactly, that's why, you know. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening and for the questions.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of Gallery Weekend.
Bye.